In central Texas tonight, a catastrophic flood emergency. At least 13 people are dead, according to authorities, including children. And at least 20 kids are missing from a summer camp after a sudden surge along the Guadalupe River.
There's chaos in Texas as it has just been hit hard by a massive flood, and everything feels out of control. Roads have turned into rivers, homes are underwater, many properties have been damaged, and people are struggling to stay safe. It all happened so fast that one minute things were normal, the next, chaos everywhere. But how did it get this bad? Who's helping the people affected? And what comes next? Join us as we break down what caused the terrifying flash flood in Texas, how it's affecting lives, and what's being done about it. How the flood caught Texas off guard.
Officials say flash flooding in the U.S. state of Texas has killed at least 24 people. Rescue teams are searching for more than 20 girls from a summer camp who are unaccounted for.
Central Texas, often nicknamed Flash Flood Alley, has long lived under the shadow of sudden, violent downpours. But nothing quite prepared the region for what unfolded in the early hours of July 4th. A massive storm system, unusually stationary, hovered over the Guadalupe River basin and released a torrent, and between 5 and 11 inches of rain fell in a matter of hours. In just 45 minutes, the river surged by a staggering 26 feet. That's not a steady rise, it's a roar. Gauges, drainage systems, and safety buffers were no match for the flood's force. The National Weather Service had tried to sound the alarm. A flood watch went out as early as the afternoon of July 3rd. A flash flood warning followed just before midnight, and by 3 minutes after 4 a.m., a full-blown flash flood emergency had been declared. Mobile phones buzzed. Alerts were triggered, but who was awake to see them? Most residents were asleep. Campers, too. The storm struck not just with water, but with silence creeping in while the region slept. But what made this event so deadly? You'll soon find out. Officials confirmed the alerts went out on time. Forecasts were accurate. Yet when Kerr County Judge Rob Kelly said, "We didn't know this flood was coming," he wasn't denying science. He was admitting what many now feel. Forecasts are useless when systems to act on them are weak, or when people never hear the warning in the first place. It's not just about issuing alerts. It's about making sure they mean something when seconds count. Much of the blame has been lobbed at the National Weather Service, especially in light of federal staffing shortages. But the forecasters stood their ground, asserting that they did their job.
We have a complex low-pressure system centered about 650 miles northwest of Kauai this morning. It's tracking generally towards the east and generally weakening.
Their models worked. Their warnings were timely. The real problem? Translating forecast data into real-world response, especially when people are asleep, off-grid, or far from emergency infrastructure. And that's exactly what made this event so deadly. Flash floods are already treacherous in daylight. At night, they're nearly impossible to detect until it's too late. Darkness swallows visibility, cuts off escape routes, and drowns out warning sounds. In remote locations like Camp Mystic, where 750 girls were asleep near the river, there were no sirens, no evacuation signals, no drills, just rising water and panic. The horror that played out at Camp Mystic is now etched into the region's memory. As the Guadalupe River exploded over its banks, floodwaters stormed through dormitories and cabins. Some campers managed to climb trees, others were stranded on rooftops. By the time daylight broke, the camp was isolated, with no food, no power, and no way to communicate with the outside world. Even in more populated areas, the so-called last mile of communication broke down. Mobile alerts work when they're received, understood, and acted on. But patchy service, old phones, or sleep can blunt the sharpest warnings. And with no outdoor sirens in Kerr County, there was nothing to jolt the sleeping into action. This wasn't a case of ignorance. Since 2016, local officials had debated installing a siren-based flood warning system, but the estimated cost, less than $1 million, was seen as too steep. Taxpayer resistance shelved the idea. So when the July 2025 flood arrived, the county had accurate forecasts, but no audible way to spread the word. What's perhaps most heartbreaking is that history had already taught this lesson. The 1987 flood brought similar destruction to the Guadalupe's banks. Afterwards, leaders promised reforms, better alerts, stricter zoning, and updated maps. Decades passed, but the reforms never fully took root. When the water rose again in 2025, the same old vulnerabilities cracked open once more. Now, Kerr County is in mourning. Over 90 people are dead. Children are missing.
All right, and moving on, torrential rains are wreaking havoc in the United States, triggering flash floods across several areas. Hundreds of people have lost their lives while many are said to be missing.
And while the storm was ferocious, it wasn't entirely unforeseen. What failed wasn't the science, it was the system of response. Forecasts came, but the flood came faster, louder, and deadlier. So here's the real question. If warnings are accurate but no one hears them, can we really call them warnings at all? Homes lost and lives changed by the disaster. What began as a peaceful summer retreat for 750 girls turned into a nightmare by 4 a.m. on July 4th. Camp Mystic, nestled beside the Guadalupe River, was suddenly under siege from nature. As the river surged by nearly 29 feet in less than an hour, cabins filled with floodwater, soaking sleeping campers and cutting off escape routes. In the pitch black, some girls smashed windows to flee. Others scrambled onto rooftops or clung to trees, their screams drowned out by the roar of rushing water. The place meant to offer joy and friendship became a site of raw survival. In the midst of the chaos, one man ran toward the danger. Richard "Dick" Eastland, the camp's director since 1974, made a final, heroic choice: to try and save the youngest girls housed in the Bubble Inn cabin. He loaded them into his SUV, determined to get them to safety, but the flood overtook him. When rescue teams later found his vehicle, he and 3 campers were inside, gone, but not forgotten. His sacrifice spoke louder than any warning could have. He gave everything to shield others. As the floodwaters receded, the devastation became tragically clear. By July 7th, at least 82 people were confirmed dead, 28 of them children. Many more were missing. Some families never had time to grab more than a flashlight or phone before their homes or campsites were swallowed whole. Among them was Thomas Rux, who fled his RV with nothing but essentials and watched helplessly as it floated downriver. The losses were not only personal, they were generational, communal, and deeply scarring. Yet amid the despair, stories of courage emerged. Ordinary people became rescuers. The Garcias, a local couple, used their small boat to pull survivors from attic windows. Coast Guard swimmer Scott Ruskin braved debris-filled currents to save 165 people, many of them children. He later said the real heroes were the campers who remained calm, listened, and worked together. Their discipline, he believed, prevented an even worse outcome. But here's a part that will get you emotional. The destruction extended well beyond the camp. Families like Maria and Felipe Tapia barely had time to react before floodwaters filled their home. They swam out in total darkness. Downriver, entire RV parks were flattened. In one park, all 24 trailers vanished in less than an hour. For many, it wasn't just a home that was lost, but everything inside: memories, livelihoods, and a sense of safety.
Heartbreak and hope in Texas this morning after catastrophic floods.
It's been stunning for people, Errol, to see the extent of destruction.
Survivors described the sounds of that night as unforgettable. Some heard frantic honking, others heard people screaming for help as cars floated past. A waitress in a local restaurant recounted watching headlights disappear beneath water as she stood helpless. The chaos was sudden, violent, and disorienting, leaving people with only seconds to act. As dawn broke, the search began. Helicopters hovered overhead, boats skimmed floodplains. Volunteers and rescue teams moved through the muddy wreckage, covering more than 100 kilometers of devastated land. In some cases, families were joyfully reunited. In others, they faced heartbreak. Still, the work didn't stop. Every face missing was a reason to keep searching. In the aftermath, churches and shelters became sanctuaries, not just from the storm, but from grief. Parents, siblings, counselors, and campers sat together in stunned silence. Pastors offered words of comfort, telling children it was okay to feel broken. Grief came in waves, much like the flood, but so did resilience, shown in tearful embraces and whispered prayers. Survival, for many, came down to sheer instinct. One young girl floated to safety clinging to a waterlogged mattress. A cabin of campers tied themselves together and used a rope to cross a submerged bridge, navigating swift currents with trembling hands. These were not scripted heroics. They were decisions made in moments when fear and courage collided. Now, as the river calms, the emotional toll rises. Campers like 16-year-old Callie McAllery are processing trauma that may never fully fade. In the dark, she wrote her name and emergency contact on her arm, just in case. Some families wait in hope, others in dread. The flood took lives, but it also left wounds that healing won't come easily for. Recovery, both physical and emotional, will take months, if not years. But for those who survived, their stories will live on, not just as memories of pain, but as proof of strength. But who is AOB blamed for all this? Let's find out. Broken systems and where emergency response failed. The National Weather Service, also called NWS, did what it was supposed to do. On July 3rd, it issued a flood watch, followed by increasingly urgent alerts, culminating in a rare flash flood emergency declared in the early hours of July 4th. These alerts, delivered more than 3 hours ahead of the most destructive surge, reflected accurate forecasting. But as the floodwaters rose, so did the troubling realization that timely warnings alone weren't enough. Despite the early notifications, meaningful action on the ground was delayed or absent. Kerr County officials later admitted they were caught off guard, not by the idea of flooding itself, which is common in the region, but by the unprecedented scale and speed of this particular storm. Judge Rob Kelly's words echoed the feelings of many. We didn't know this kind of flood was coming. While forecasts may have predicted danger, nothing in the county's logistical or mental preparedness matched the sudden ferocity of what came. Meteorologists pointed to a common issue known as the last mile failure, the point at which warnings must translate into immediate public awareness and action. Yes, alerts were sent, but it was 4 a.m., and most people were asleep. Even for those who were awake, patchy cellular coverage, the absence of countywide outdoor sirens, and a general lack of backup systems meant many simply didn't know the danger was at their doorstep. This communication gap wasn't accidental, it was preventable. Kerr County, the most flood-prone in Texas, has long been aware of its vulnerability. Yet, since 2016, proposed countywide siren systems were repeatedly scrapped, largely due to cost concerns and voter reluctance to fund them. It's a painful irony. The very infrastructure that could have woken sleeping residents and campers had been sidelined, even as officials acknowledged its need. As blame circled, some pointed to recent budget cuts and early retirements at federal agencies, fearing these had diminished forecasting capacity. But NWS officials stood firm. Their alerts were not only timely, but accurate. The true issue, they insisted, was not the science. It was how that science failed to reach the people who needed it most, or failed to spur immediate response where it did. There's another layer that made this disaster even more lethal: the hour it struck. A flood in daylight is terrifying. A flood in darkness is often fatal. Dozens of camps and neighborhoods lacked basic nighttime warning mechanisms. Many campers were not only asleep, but also had no drills, no protocol, and no chance. Time didn't just run out. It slipped by, unnoticed, until it was far too late. The tragedy revealed unsettling gaps in coordination. When asked about evacuation plans for local camps, both city and county officials offered uncertain answers. There appeared to be no standardized emergency communication system in place across sites, and even fewer had rehearsed flash flood responses. The flood didn't just expose physical vulnerabilities, it exposed planning ones too. By the time rescue efforts kicked in, the scale of need had already eclipsed available resources. Governor Greg Abbott reported that over 850 people were saved by air and water rescues. Yet, responders were left scrambling. Limited forewarning, combined with insufficient interagency coordination, slowed the initial response and put both rescuers and those needing help in greater danger. But this is not all. Underlying all these failures is a broader issue, a chronic underinvestment in preparedness. Kerr County's decision to forego funding sirens was not an isolated case. Across the state, FEMA funding backlogs, slow infrastructure upgrades, and delayed mitigation projects reflect a system that talks about readiness more than it actually funds it. The groundwork for this disaster was laid long before July 4th. In the end, forecasting was not the failure. The weather models worked. The alerts came. What collapsed was the bridge between knowing and acting. Without a working communication infrastructure, evacuation drills, or community-wide readiness, warnings become whispers. The lesson is clear. Precision in forecasting means little unless communities are equipped and willing to respond swiftly when the time comes. The real causes of the disaster. The Central Texas flood of July 2025 was no ordinary storm.
Right now, first responders are working tirelessly to find the more than 160 people who are still missing after flooding in Central Texas.
It was the culmination of rare meteorological forces converging at the worst possible time. A mesoscale convective complex, a large system of powerful thunderstorms, settled over the hill country and refused to budge. Supercharged by the lingering remnants of Tropical Storm Barry, it became a stationary engine of destruction. Within just a few hours, some areas recorded up to 18 inches of rain. The sky didn't just pour, it collapsed. But weather alone doesn't tell the full story. Central Texas is built like a natural funnel. Its steep hills, part of the Balcones Escarpment, are draped in shallow, clay-heavy soils that lie on top of nearly impermeable limestone. When rain falls here, it doesn't soak in, it runs off. The water moves fast, carving down hillsides and channeling into narrow riverbeds. The land isn't just unable to absorb water, it actively speeds it along, giving floods less time to be noticed and even less time to be escaped. It's no surprise then that this region is dubbed Flash Flood Alley. The nickname is not poetic, it's kind of prophetic. The combination of sharp elevation changes, winding river systems, and frequent Gulf moisture makes this one of the most flood-prone regions in the United States. Scientists have long warned that the area acts like a ramp, lifting humid air until it bursts into torrential rain. When storms arrive, they don't gently pass, they stall, they hammer, and they flood. In recent years, climate change has only added fuel to the fire. The warming of Gulf waters has increased atmospheric moisture, while hotter air holds more water vapor. The result? Heavier, more frequent rain events. Regional climate data reveals a 15% rise in intense rainfall episodes over the last 4 decades. These are not just freak events, they're part of a growing pattern. And July 2025 was a brutal reminder that the weather of tomorrow is already arriving today. The mechanics of the storm made matters worse. Meteorologists observed training thunderstorms, where storm cells repeatedly pass over the same region, dumping wave after wave of water. Combined with the atmospheric drag of Tropical Storm Barry, these back-to-back deluges created what some experts called a rain bomb, which is a sudden, overwhelming burst of precipitation that overwhelms rivers before anyone can respond. Nature may have set the stage, but human development intensified the disaster. As Central Texas grows, More natural land has been covered with asphalt and concrete. These impervious surfaces block water from seeping into the ground, sending it racing into storm drains and waterways instead. With fewer wetlands, less forest cover, and more pavement, runoff surged faster and higher than ever. Drainage systems designed for smaller storms couldn't handle the new reality. In case you're wondering why this is so, keep watching to find out. Critical ecological buffers, like wetlands and riparian zones, have steadily vanished under the weight of real estate development. Once, these green zones helped absorb rainfall and slowed the rise of floodwaters. Now stripped of vegetation and built over with houses and roads, riverbanks no longer cushion the blow. Without those natural barriers, floods don't just rise, they race. The infrastructure meant to manage water couldn't keep up. Many of the drainage channels, culverts, and floodplain designs in central Texas date back decades, built during times when such extreme rainfall was rare. Today, those designs are dangerously outdated. Cities and rural counties alike have grown in population, but not in storm readiness. As rainfall has intensified, the systems meant to hold back water have cracked under the pressure. Poor planning further deepened the crisis. Hilltops and riverbanks have been increasingly cleared for development without integrating proper flood controls. At the same time, ranching practices such as overgrazing and repeated soil compaction have reduced the land's ability to absorb water. This toxic mix of exposed soil and unchecked construction led to even faster, higher water levels, turning storm runoff into deadly flash floods. At its core, the 2025 flood was a collision between a powerful natural system and a series of man-made vulnerabilities. While the storm itself may have been beyond control, the level of devastation was not. Right after the flood hit Kerr County and nearby towns, help came fast. Groups like World Central Kitchen, Mercy Chefs, and the Red Cross didn't just send stuff, they showed up. They cooked warm meals, handed out blankets and soap, and gave comfort to tired rescue workers and scared families. Regular people were heroes. Thousands came with boats, chainsaws, and helping hands. They cleared rubble, comforted strangers, and searched for the missing. Most weren't part of any group. They just showed up because they cared. Churches became more than places of worship. They became homes. Cross Kingdom Church, First United Methodist, and others gave out supplies, reunited families, and comforted kids. People didn't just find shelter there, they found love and community. Now, the focus is shifting to the future. Locals want better warning systems, smarter building plans, and stronger infrastructure. They don't just want to recover, they want to be better prepared. Do you think this flood could have been avoided? Let us know in the comments section. We hope you enjoyed watching this video. Remember to like, share it, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.